Hey, it is my honor and my pleasure to have Rhonda Noordyk with me today. She is a divorce financial strategist, the founder and CEO of the Women's Financial Wellness Center, and the host of the podcast Divorce Conversations for Women. Rhonda, it is awesome to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
This is so exciting because I think, as you and I have recently figured out, meeting in person, we serve the same population of people, to a very large degree, and financial wellness, financial abuse, financial security is something that is on, I would say, nearly everyone's mind. So having you in your area of expertise here to share with us is just fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is definitely something that I know people are swirling around in their heads. All the what if questions around the finances is certainly something that I think keeps women in particular up at night.
For sure. And as I mentioned, your business is the Women's Financial Wellness Center. But as you and I have talked, you do not hate men, right? It's not about that. And as I've
Mm-mm.
found in my work, there's so many, whether it's men who abuse women or women who abuse men, or men who abuse men or women who abuse women in same-sex relationships, it really all just comes down to this division of power, or at least perceived division of power that's gone on, right? And that creates a lot of the challenges in the financial resolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting because one of the things that I had to do some self-reflection on early on before I even started my business, was, okay, what is it about working with women that that so resonates with me? And after kind of going through this exercise of what energizes you and what drains your energy and what do you wish you were doing more of? And oh yeah, that last question, what do you hate? I hate abuse. I hate abuse. And that at the core, as I've been running my business over the last 9 years, has been really the thing that drives me, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of abuse that's happening, not only with individuals that are contemplating or going through divorce, but amongst attorneys and commissioners and judges and the court system. And there's so many dynamics to this that I really want to be able to continue to bring a voice to particularly the women, right? Because that's my niche, but men need help too. To just really help them have a voice in a time when they're probably feeling very alone.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you were so explicit in the wanting to end abuse, because I find that so often it's a word that people kind of shy away from. Like, well, it was bad, but it wasn't really abusive, or, well, he never hit me or she never hit me or whatever. And so I really love opening up this conversation to include as domestic violence and as abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and financial abuse, which is just all too common and all too often swept under the rug as being like not that bad.
Yeah.
Because the police don't get called on emotional abuse or even
Yeah.
necessarily financial abuse.
Yeah. It's true. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in the court system around that because there are some states on the East and West Coast that are really starting to make some waves, change some laws to help the court systems in those states recognize financial and emotional and psychological abuse, but there's a lot of work to be done in this area. And I think you're right. Those words, I mean, there's so many times when I'm talking to clients, and I know that you are talking to clients, and you're like, okay, well, tell me a little bit about the dynamics of what's going on here. And they have never really like looked in the mirror and thought of themselves in that situation. It's always easier to see outside, right? Like, oh, I know somebody, right? But to look in the mirror and say, oh my gosh, that somebody's me is hard. And around the financial aspect, I think one of the things that I discovered early on was so very early on in my business. So prior to this, I'd been in the financial industry for about 12 years. And so similar to you and your background, it's like we had very structured, background. And then we left because we really had a passion to do more, build on that experience and really take it to the next level. And I had done some financial coaching through the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I was driving home from that session and I thought, this is the problem is that in that group, there were 20 organizations, 20 plus organizations, and I was the only one that was not a nonprofit. So I was a for-profit business, but everybody else was nonprofits. And they said to me, Rhonda, the work that you're doing, the people that you're helping, they don't need this help. They have plenty of money. And I was like, oh, this is a problem. Like, so this became the conversation over lunch where I was like, listen, we need to unpack this a little bit because that's actually not true. I've sat across tables, right, of multi-million dollar clients and they are alone. They're sad. They have more zeros in the bank account than maybe some other people, but they don't even know what it means for them. They only have access to a credit card that their spouse is controlling. They've never written a check. They have no access to cash. This is a problem. And the paradigm for people is that, well, she's going to be fine. She's going to be okay. There's plenty of money there. Yeah, but what does that mean? And why is it somebody else's job to define what fine is? Like, so we're going to bypass taking a look at true transparency and doing the discovery and making sure that we have full transparency on the assets because, well, there's going to be plenty of money for her when we don't even know what that number is. Like this is this real stuff that people aren't talking about behind the scenes. It's just, everybody's like, oh, it's going to be equitable. It's 50, you live in a marital property state or, it's going to be split evenly or whatever. No, the outcome's only as good as the data. And if we can't get the data on transparency on the front end, because people are, I call it the dam, right? It's like they're dodging, the discovery, they're arguing and finding, excuses for everything, and they're misrepresenting. Oh, I forgot to send. Oh, I missed. Oh, my business is doing terrible. My PN, oh, I must have, time and time again, that's what's happening. But nobody's willing to talk about it because everybody's like, well, we just want to do this amicably. If we're contemplating or going through us, we just want to do it amicably. We just want to, not fight, and we don't want to have any conflict. And so we're going to let all this stuff go. And then in the meantime, women's lifestyle is going down 41% after the divorce is over, while the spouse continues to earn and make money. And, that gap in the wage gap plus the work history gap, right? They're accelerated by years and years, sometimes decades. And women are just trying to get back into it. So there's a lot of gaps that we need to address. And I think the good news is, it's all addressable. It's all stuff that can be figured out, but we have to know what questions to be asking. We have to have an honest conversation. I know this is something that you talk about, right? Is just really looking at those patterns of what's happened in the past and and if there's been financial abuse in the past, going into the divorce process, this false sense of like, hey, the justice system's going to help equalize it. They're not.
No.
They're not. Like, we're going to have to. Now, can we? Yes. If you've got the right team of people, if you've asking the right questions, if you've got the right strategy, can we move the needle? Yes. Is it easy? No. But since I,
And
since I started my business 9 years ago, almost 9 years ago, 8.5, I've been able to move $20 million into the hands of women that otherwise would have been left on the table. Why? Because I was willing to challenge the status quo. I was willing to ask questions. I was willing to not accept what I was seeing as, yeah, that's just how we've always done it. And I'm just over it. I'm just over it.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I find so often is, when we talked before about that, that label of abuse and people not seeing themselves as an abuse victim, even if they did, a lot of times people don't want to own it because people who are victimized by narcissists are super smart, are super successful. They're the people that have everything going for them. They elevate the narcissist status. They were
Yes.
amazing before they met, but they're devalued to the point where they feel like they're worthless, like they're invisible, they're going to end up alone. And so even identifying themselves as a victim of abuse feels disempowering when really the opposite is true. And I think the same thing shows up in what you describe in terms of the finances. No one necessarily wants to admit that they don't know how to write a check, or that they were the sole wage earner, but their name isn't on any of the investment accounts.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen? But it happens all the time. And so I think that that's part of its society, part of it's the narcissist manipulating the system in the society that we have to create this place where people don't want to come forward and necessarily challenge that status quo or be visible about what's been going on in their life.
Yeah.
He felt forever like the weight of the relationship, like holding it together, was 100% their responsibility. And they already feel like a failure for the fact that it's not staying together. They don't really want to admit all of these other perceived failures,
Yeah.
even though they're
Yeah.
not, even though it's financial abuse,
Yeah.
not their personal failure.
Yeah. And, and I think that's where, like you have mentioned in the past, right? It's important to find that team of people that can be that advocate, for you. And I think it's important because a lot of times people are like, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to, challenge that. I don't want to make, the other person upset. I don't want the abuse to get worse. Oh, there's all these kinds of things that go on, right? But at the end of the day, we have to find the people that understand the dynamics within these relationships, that also understand and aren't afraid to be assertive, to be confident. I mean, I always say, going into these types of situations, a lot of times people say, oh, I need an aggressive attorney and I need somebody who's going to be, no, that actually can be counterproductive because they're going to go in and they're going to tick everybody off. And then they have to try to figure out, like, well, now what do we do? Right. Like, I always say, I want for me, for my clients, right? I want humbly confident. I want somebody who can come in, knows their stuff, can be firm, respectful, but not get pushed around. And that's really what we need to be looking for,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely true.
you know? So,
So you and I were talking earlier about this false sense of security with regard to finances, and I found it so fascinating. I'm hoping that you can explain more so that
yeah.
everyone understands, what the what's an example of it? Like, what is it we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because as I spend my entire day, right, talking with women and having conversations, and you start to notice these patterns. And I was like, okay, how do I articulate what I'm seeing, right? And it's really there's a false sense of a whole bunch of things. And we can do a whole series on that. But the first one really is the false sense of security and how it really manifests itself and how we would start to notice it is where people will say, "Oh, hey, Rhonda, I just talked to my spouse and yeah, we're, considering divorce, but he said, don't worry about it. There's going to be plenty of money there. I'm going to be well taken care of. You can keep the house," he'll say, or "I'll keep the pension and you can keep the house." Or, "I'll come and cut the grass," or, that I wouldn't want anything but the best for you and the kids. I have your best interest in my I mean, there's like all of these things, right? And what happens is, particularly around the finances, when we start to hear those things, it's okay, let's look at those patterns, right? Is this a pattern, right? From years gone by where I really can trust what this person is saying, or is it really intended to manipulate? And oftentimes, particularly with the narcissistic aspect, you see that it's meant to manipulate. Don't ask too many questions. Don't engage an attorney. I'm smarter than you are. You haven't handled the finances. You can't do this on your own. I mean, there's like the such a bunch of layers, right, of all the stuff that I know in your mind is like, yep, this is checking all of the boxes or most of them, from the work that you do. But it really is challenging because women want to believe the best in people. And they really want to believe that when their spouse says, I have your best interest at heart, that they really mean it.
Absolutely.
And the reality of it is that sometimes they don't.
I think that that's brilliant and it's so true. And people do want to believe the best in someone else. Part of that's the trauma bond that holds them in that place. But there's also an element of, in terms of the narcissist behaviors and looking at those patterns, like you were just talking about, there's the pattern of future faking, which might be, like you open a card and here's the picture of a cruise ship and they tell you they're taking you on a cruise for your birthday, only you never go. They never
Mm,
do it. Or inside is a picture of, the new car that they're going to buy you and you don't go. Or maybe you in couples therapy tell them you want a divorce and they come home later that evening and say, I was thinking we should do a vow renewal next summer for our 30th anniversary. And it's just
mm.
like trying to create this future. You're saying, I'm not sure this relationship's going to work out. They're like, would you like to go to Italy next summer? Right.
Right. And am I going with you or am I going? No.
Right. And so if you that pattern can be really hard to see when you're in it, which is one of the reasons I like to talk about it and I like to write about it, so people start to see how many things have they promised to do. Because the reality is the narcissist is going to say whatever they need to do to end the conflict and to get what they want in that moment. They don't care if you're mad next summer when you don't go to Italy, but in this moment it's going to
Yeah.
end this conversation or this conflict, and then they can go back to doing whatever they want to do. So
Right.
we have a pattern of that. In my mind, that would make those comments that you were saying they make as far as the false sense of security in the future, during and after the divorce, far less credible, believable as something that they're actually going to follow through on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then you can see, I mean, you can see why parties stay longer, right? Because again, just what you said, it makes total sense, right? Like, okay, yeah, it looks like they're, clearly committed to, wanting to do something moving forward. I mean, we're already planning, we blah, 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 you know. But I think the other hard part of that is to, again, take a look at those patterns, be honest with ourselves around what's really happening, and just be able to have those honest conversations, with ourselves.
So what is the what 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 is it that they're trying to do with this false sense of security? What's is the underlying meaning behind that the manipulation? Is it like,
I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the power and control, um, and staying in control. So they figure, hey, if I tell this person what they want to hear, then they're not going to ask too many questions. And kind of to your point, like if somebody knows, hey, I might be going to Italy in the summer, then the whole conversation in their mind, particularly for women, from what I've found, kind of just gets on a back burner, right? They're not really thinking about it as much. They're not asking questions. They're not engaging. They're not interviewing attorneys because, I mean, there's this chance that, we might be getting back together, staying together, and hey, we've got this, thing on the horizon that, gosh, it just looks like there's still this, possibility, right? In the meantime, spouse is moving money, changing beneficiaries, restructuring companies, making all kinds of financial moves behind the scenes because now they've pacified this person to keep them in a neutral state. And I see it happen all the time. Um, and I think women also then feel bad, like, well, hey, it's good now. Oh, we're getting along now. Oh, it's peaceful now. Yeah, this is the perfect time to start getting empowered. We don't have to wait till we're backed up against a wall half dead before we say, "Okay, I'm flying the white flag here." Like, and I don't know how we I know it's human nature in a sense of like we're going to either move away from things that bring us pain, right? We want to get away from those, even if we don't know how, or we're going to move toward things that are bringing us pleasure. And in the scenario you mentioned, we're doing both. We're getting away from the pain. We're moving away, toward things that bring us pleasure. So we stay. And we as women have to say, we're done with this. We're just done with it. We have to find a way that a little bit of internal strength, whether we can muster it ourselves, whether we need to surround ourselves with people who can speak into us and be that voice for us when we can't. But we stay way too long. And, women in these situations, there's not one person that I have talked to in the years that I've been doing this that says, you know what, I'm really glad I stayed. They all say, where were you 20 years ago? Or why didn't I leave 10 years ago?
Absolutely. Or
Not
why
one.
didn't my friends or family, or because so often they leave after, and because I work with so many victims of covert narcissistic abuse, those relationships are decades long, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And when they finally leave, friends and family will be like, oh yeah, I could see that that was bad. And they're like, why didn't you say anything? But the cognitive dissonance and the trauma bond that the narcissist created with the person, it prevents them from seeing that the relationship is abusive in the beginning. It prevents them from believing that it's abusive even once they've seen it themselves. It keeps them in this loop of hoping that they're going to change. It might be the 45,000th time, but this time maybe they mean it. This time maybe they can do it. It keeps them in this hoping that dream that they had when they got married 30, 40 years ago, of growing old together, of sitting on the front porch together when the grandkids come over, of the financial security of the whole thing. They want that dream so much that they can't see the reality. The trauma bond like obscures their ability to see the reality of what is. And it's so true that that whether they muster up the strength themselves or find someone who can speak to them and hear it in a way. I've had a few clients who someone will tell them, 20-year relationship, this person is toxic and is a narcissist. They file for divorce within months. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. We need to figure out how to bottle that.
Yeah.
Because that being stuck is miserable.
It's miserable. I remember seeing a quote that was like, when you're stuck in indecision, it's literally inner civil war, right?
Absolutely.
This feeling, constant inner turmoil, and women are starting to see it's impacting their health, it's impacting their relationships, it's impacting their confidence, it's impacting all of these areas, you know, of their life. And for what's the bottom line with all of the pieces, right? I mean, of course, it's usually fear. But it isn't just usually like, oh, I'm just afraid of money. It's I'm afraid because I don't feel like I'm smart enough. I don't feel like I have the experience. I haven't handled it in a long time, if at all, and I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be, living from paycheck to paycheck if there even is like there's all of these fears around it. But most of that is shaped because of this imbalance of power around the finances. And I will often have women call and they'll say, Rhonda, I'm really smart, but like there's no but, period. You're smart, period. Right? You
Right.
just haven't had the opportunity to handle the finances. But how would you? Right? Nobody sits around and sings kumbaya around the finances, all the time. Usually one person handles it. It's kind of a divide and conquer. You take this, I take that, and everybody's kind of got their role. And it's not to say that, that kind of is a natural kind of thing that usually happens. The difference in these types of situations, though, is there's one person who literally has control over all the finances, where the parties don't have passwords. Or in order for them to reset the password, it goes to their spouse's phone, so they have to approve it. They don't have cash. They don't have checks. They have the one credit card. They don't have anything in their name. And women often will be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, like, I haven't signed tax returns in 4 or 5 years. I'm like, well, you can call the IRS and you can get a transcript. You can request a transcript. Does not require, anything except you requiring it, and you'll get a printout. They're like, how have the taxes been submitted since I haven't signed them? Well, yeah. So now that everything's electronic, right? That's super easy, even though they're not supposed to be doing that. It happens. Oh, I thought I was on the title of that vehicle. Oh my gosh, my spouse refinanced the house and I'm not on the mortgage. I mean, this is the stuff that's happening and we allow it to happen because we're afraid, right? There's just a lot of, again, a lot of healing work that needs to be done in this area around money. I mean, in the late 70s was when women could finally take out a loan without having to have a male counterpart signature, whether that was a dad, brother, husband, whatever. And I find that a lot of times women are kind of still stuck in that mindset, like, Rhonda, I'm afraid of debt, or I'm afraid to take out a loan, or I'm afraid to, and I said, well, here's the deal. Like, we can do that without having anybody tell us that it's okay. We just have to look at weigh the pros and the cons of making some of these decisions and make sure we've got the right information and then make the decision, right? And so it's just there's a lot of work that I think we as women need to be doing, but it starts with us. It starts with our internal relationship. What is our relationship with money? Are we avoiders? Are we collaborators? Do we want to collaborate and have a collaborative conversation around money, but we prefer not to take the lead? Do we want to be taking the lead? Are we an analyzer where we love spreadsheets and comparative shopping and or are we self-assured in that area of finances, not because we woke up that way, but because we made the choice, right? To take ownership, to gather information, to get the knowledge, to walk in experience, that is what builds the confidence. There's a lot of times when I will put myself in situations because I know, first of all, if I'm encouraging my clients to do it, then guess who needs to do it, right? Went and bought a car on my own, because I wanted the experience. I wanted to show up and see how I was being talked to and ask the right questions and, all that kind of stuff. I bought an office building on my own. I didn't tell anybody I was going to make that purchase, right? I mean, because I wanted to be able to do it by myself. So then I could say, okay, well, what did I learn? What did I ask? And I think one of the biggest things I would often say is, okay, help me understand this. Simple question. So if there are women that are in the midst of like feeling like, Rhonda, I don't have access to any financials. I don't have passwords. I don't have any. Okay, there you become really good private investigators when you have to. So you watch the mail. Oh, look, there's a statement from where Prudential. Okay, write that down. Oh, we've got something from Summit Credit. Right, just start watching for those clues. Oh, husband left his computer open. I'm not really looking, I just happened to see something, right? Oh, look, in the recycling bin, there's a whole bunch of statements that we had a what credit card? Like when women can become very aware of the things that are around them, you'll find more than what you realize that maybe you could, and at least gives you clues to, what there might be. And, I would say for women, the other big thing is, hey, what can we do to challenge that when they're in this space? When we said, yeah, we've kind of bought into this false sense of financial security, and what can we do about it? And there's a couple things. Like I said, one is start watching the mail. If you don't have access to the mail, which some people don't, spouses get the mail. They don't even want their spouse to see the mail. You can sign up for informed delivery through the U.S. Postal Service, which then you get a copy of like a picture of the mail that's going to the house, gets sent via email, so you can at least see some of the clues. The other thing is it's okay to be like, yeah, can you just help me understand? Like, I know it's probably tax time coming up. I don't think I've ever signed a tax return. Can you help me understand? Like, you just become like kind of a little ditzy, for lack of a better. You just be like, oh, really? Like, help me understand, and just be super aware. Um, and then when people are ready to actually get a little bit more like, okay, I pretty much know that I need to be going through the divorce process soon, and I don't even know where to start looking. There are some strategies that we can help, women implement. One of which, we do have a private investigator that we work with on the financial side out of New York. And basically what he can do is he can do a search, a public search, so we stay under the radar, but it just helps us know if there are other entities, LLCs, corporations, titles of properties, um, all kinds of stuff that he can find out, and then he creates a summary for us, and that way then we can say, huh, yeah, husband said he doesn't have he only has one business, because we're showing four. So tell us about the other three that he didn't disclose, because again, remember, the numbers on the back end are only as good as the questions we know to ask and the information that's being put in the disclosure documents on the front end. And if we don't know where to look, the attorneys are going to be like, well, he disclosed everything. We don't have any indication to show that there's anything else until we do the search with the private investigator. And then we can come back and say, and what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And that's really the only way. I mean, one of the only ways to really know what's going on.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. This is so helpful. I know you and I have talked, but I think it would just be fantastic for us to continue this conversation, because I am sure that these are the exact kind of things that people want to hear and they want to know. It's just so important. And so often people don't know who to ask. So you being the expert, how does someone reach out and connect with you, read any content you've created, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way is probably my website, WFWC, so Women's Financial Wellness Center, divorce.com, WFWCdivorce.com. And from there, they'll be able to see a few things. One is they can go directly to the podcast, Divorce Conversations for Women. There are some blog articles on there. There's also some different courses and stuff like that that they can check out. And then they can also schedule a consult if they would like to chat one-on-one. So there's the website actually does serve as a pretty good hub for all of the things. And certainly they can also find Women's Financial Wellness Center on Facebook and Rhonda Noordyk on Instagram.
Awesome. That's awesome. And I'll drop all those links in the description as well, so people can click on them easily and find you. Thank you. This has been absolutely eye-opening and fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat today. This was important information, and I love being able to link arms to get it out there.
That's awesome. Do you have any parting words or inspirational thought for people who've listened today?
Yeah, I think, the one thing that I would say as we wrap up our time is you can do this. You're smart. You just need to make sure that you've got the right team of people that can help you navigate through. So it's knowledge plus experience that equals the confidence. And I look forward to seeing, hearing, being part of all the conversations around helping women be confident with their money.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.